Hello and welcome to episode 335 of Geektown Radio. I am back this week with... Darryl, how are you doing?
Doing great. It's great to be back.
It's lovely to have you back on. So it's been a few weeks. What have you been up to?
Well, I have been moving around the streaming services, and this time it's Shudder with Seance,
Yes.
which is a 2021 horror film.
Right.
It stars Suki Waterhouse, Ella Ray Smith, Madison Beatty, and Inanna Sarkis, and it's set in a girls' boarding school, and it opens on a scary Halloween night, and I think they're playing with a Ouija board, and things happen, and it's revealed that some of the girls are sort of scaring one of the, not popular ones.
Right.
But then somehow at the end of the night, she ends up dead.
Okay.
And it sort of moves on from there. The school is sort of struggling to keep the parents happy. And in comes a new girl that's played by Suki Waterhouse, and she sort of immediately makes a bit of an impression. You sort of follow on from there, and it sort of goes back and forth, and you're just sort of wondering, is it supernatural or is it something a little bit more straightforward? And it's a fun little teen horror, Canadian made, international cast. You might remember Eddie Ray Smith from Into the Badlands.
Ah, right. Okay.
It's a fun little horror. I've been trying a few Shudder things. There was one about a live exorcism on stream. That was quite fun.
Interesting.
Yep, recommend it. If you're going to try the trial, definitely add that as one of the films to get through.
Yeah, Shudder's got a 7-day free trial. So if you're into the horror, it's worth trying out. And the Shudder app is on like all the Samsung smart TVs and iPhones and Apple TV and Roku and Fire TV and all that sort of stuff. So, the app's all over the place. I don't know how much it is regularly, but it's what, $5.99, $7.99. It's one of those sort of things, isn't it? I think so. And they do have some good sort of exclusive stuff on Shudder as well, don't they? So if you're into your horror, worth looking at.
Definitely. And the next one is Cracow Monsters. That's pretty new. Just opened last week. It's on Netflix. All 8 episodes dropped to full. And as you might have guessed, it's set in Poland, and it follows this university student that has a very haunted past, as you'll see from the first episode. And she joins a mysterious professor and his group of gifted students who investigate paranormal activity and fight demons.
Okay.
So I've seen 2 episodes of it so far. Pretty gritty, pretty urban, lots of rain, lots of walking through the rain. Pretty scary. Not really with the jump scares, just quite disturbing stuff.
Right.
It's very much demons and possibly angels, but it's too early for us to know. But definitely the demons. It's just this girl, your typical protagonist, loner, I don't need anybody's help. And she's sort of trying slowly to be integrated into this happy-go-lucky group of, I guess, all like ghost hunters, but they know that obviously ghosts are real. Yeah. And so it's only 2 episodes, so 8 episodes, I guess. So it'll sort of pick up by episode 6, like all Netflix 8-episode runs do. Yeah. So we'll just have to see. It looks interesting enough so far.
It's Polish, isn't it, that? So
yes, it is.
How are you watching it? Subtitled or dubbed?
Subtitled.
Right.
I might try a dub. There was The School on Amazon Prime. That had a good dub. That had mostly British actors doing the voiceovers. And that was a show about paranormally conspiracy thriller show about a sort of like reform school in Spain. That's in the middle of nowhere. Yeah.
The Netflix dubs tend to be pretty well done, generally. They seem to do a reasonable job with them. So
so if you like horror, like sort of gritty horror, definitely worth reading. I also pre-ordered and got Gran Turismo 7 on the PS4.
Yes.
I'll be honest, I haven't got to pay that much of it, but you can't really do a lot of the content until you pass your driver's licenses, which are tests.
Yes.
Lots of time attacks that you do across various cars and tracks. Yeah. And so I've done all of B. I was working my way through A. It's very similar to the first one. It has that feel again. Obviously, it's updated in the ways it should. It has like little extra bits of content. I was mostly doing single player stuff because that's how I do. I like to get the licenses done quickly so I don't have to worry about them again.
Yes.
I've been reading about the issues and the fact that they pulled a fast one.
Microtransactions, yes.
microtransactions and doubling the cost of everything after the patch. So that you definitely need the microtransactions. Yeah, that is a shame. And it is a shame also that you can't really play it offline.
Right.
Which is a bit silly, but you know, that's the way for the future.
It's apparently got hammered on Metacritic. It's like the lowest user scores on Metacritic in PlayStation exclusive history due to the microtransactions and the sort of pay-to-play system. So, yeah. If you're not a fan of microtransactions, that looks like one to avoid. But yeah, I mean, the reviews in terms of just reviewing the game have generally been very positive.
The game is a lot of fun.
But yeah, the Metacritic score apparently is absolutely in the toilet. So yeah, this trend for microtransactions in games really annoys me. There seems to be a balance of now you've got some developers that are just going like, screw it, we're just going to do it. And the other side are kind of no way, no how, you know, they're using it almost as a promotion of, look, we're not trying to rip you off. It's really weird.
It is particularly strange because the previous proper Gran Turismo release got absolutely hammered for the exact same reason, for that always online thing. So you'd assume that it sort of would have learned something there, but unfortunately not, it seems.
Yeah.
So we're stuck there again. I mean, I'll be dipping in and out. I mean, I used to play when I played the first one, you do sit there and you do throw 6-7 hours into it. But obviously I'm working now full time, so it won't be quite that easy. So I'll just be dipping in and out of it. But yeah, it is a shame. It's a very strange thing to do to a racing game, especially on a simulator like that. It's disappointing.
And there's a lot more competition as well because I mean, I played some of the early Gran Turismo games, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there now in terms of racing games.
No, exactly what you mean. And it's also Forza. And it's a shame. So far, what I've played, I've enjoyed, but I haven't really got into thing. And I'm not really one to be racing online.
Yeah. Good game slightly ruined by greed, by the sounds of it, yes.
Just a throwback. You know, I was talking about that live streaming exorcism.
Yes.
For those people who are interested, that's called The Cleansing Hour.
Right, okay.
So, yeah, and that's also on Shudder. So just in case you want to go back, and that's a pretty wild one. That's probably better than Seance. Well, Seance is okay, but that is pretty solid.
Okay, cool.
So, my last thing I'm going to talk about is Doneyhead. And Doneyhead follows Mona, a failed writer who carves out a life of isolation while caring for her ailing Sikh father. When he has a debilitating stroke, her 3 successful siblings show up on her doorstep determined to take control of the situation. And this is written, directed, and starring Agam Darshi, who people might recognize from Sanctuary or an episode of Stargate SG-1 a while back. And she's had quite a career, independent things, and she also appears in DMZ, which is just released on HBO Max. I'll talk about this because we reviewed it for the site over at Hollywood North News, you can catch.
Right.
And we also have an interview with Agam herself. I was lucky enough to sit down with her and talk
excellent.
About films. You can also catch that. I just put up that article. I separated it into an article itself, and obviously it's on our YouTube. So yeah, it's an interesting. It's a story about the immigrant experience. Sort of spoke to me as first generation. It's set in Regina in Canada, and it's interesting. It sort of pulls you in. It gets intense in places, but it's a lot of fun, and I would definitely recommend it as a watch. And you can catch it on Netflix. It's just right there. Just type in Doneyhead and off you go.
Interesting. Yes, I do.
Because when I reviewed it, it was just getting a limited cinematic release in Canada.
Yeah, I do recognise her. She was born in Birmingham randomly.
Yes.
Although moved to Calgary at the age of 14, apparently.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Yeah, it pops up in a number of things. She's been in the episodes of The Flash. She was in Arrow.
Oh yeah, forget. Yeah, she was in Arrow, and you've seen her in Flash as Queen.
Yes.
The head of the Royal Flush Gang.
Right, yes.
Because she's had 3 episodes, I think, by now.
Yeah, it looks like she played a different character in Arrow.
Yeah, just a different character in Arrow.
And Sanctuary, she played Kate Freelander in Sanctuary, and yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's cool.
And it also stars Kim Coates, a very famous Canadian actor.
Yes, Sons of Anarchy guy. Yes.
And Stephen Lobo, who you might recognize from Continuum or Van Helsing, and he's pretty well known.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and he's in Snowpiercer. You like Snowpiercer, don't you?
Yes, and I don't remember him being in Snowpiercer, but yes.
At least in a few episodes.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that pops up in those things and you go, oh, this is shot in Canada.
Yeah, so you can go and find those on the site. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So check it out.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad you got to interview her. That's cool. For me, gaming-wise, still been playing around with 2 Point Hospital. I've kind of put that down for a bit. There's a new, well, it's relatively recently released, I think, called Expeditions Rome, which has been really, really good fun. It's an interesting one because it's an RPG, but it's sort of a turn-based RPG set in Rome. You start off as sort of somebody who's fled Rome because somebody murdered your father and they're sort of afraid that you're going to be next, and end up joining the Roman Legion and sort of rising through the ranks. It's not first person, it's like a top-down sort of third-person thing. Story is kind of interesting. There's a lot of Roman names getting kicked around and they're all something us or something X or, so there's a lot of that going around. So it's a bit difficult keeping some people straight at every so often, but really nicely put together tactics in terms of the turn-based combat. I'm not massively into sort of combat games, but they've done a really nice job with this. It's sort of one of those things where it's turn-based, so it's not like fast-paced, it's not Twitch-based, you're not going to deal with that. But there is quite a good story that's driving it along as you start off on a little island and then you're spreading yourself out as you're trying to conquer more areas of Rome and you're rising sort of up the ranks through the Roman legions, basically. Definitely one I would recommend. Elements of things like XCOM in there, I guess, in terms of that sort of being a story-based game. It's not quite as sort of combat-focused as something like XCOM, but XCOM, Wasteland, those sort of games, it's kind of a mixture of that sort of thing, that sort of RPG element to it, mixed in with combat. So yeah, definitely one I would certainly recommend. You get a bunch of different interesting companions that come along that you can kind of talk to, and you can craft equipment and you can kind of build up your camp and all that sort of stuff. So it's got the crafting element bits to play around with as well. It came out in January, so it is relatively new. It is a full release game. It's up on Steam right now. I don't know what other platforms it's out on, but it's up on Steam. It's from THQ Nordic, who have good decent publisher as well, and it's not an early release, it is a full release, worth the money, certainly, I think. And I mean, you know what Steam's like, they have sales all the time, so even if you don't want to pay full price for it, I'm sure it will pop up on a sale at some point. But it's called Expeditions Rome, so it does kind of give you the impression that they're probably doing Expeditions something else at some point, but Expeditions Rome, this one is. Certainly, if you like those sort of Roman settings, it's definitely good fun to play through and got a solid story to it, so worth looking at. On the TV side of things, I have watched a couple of movies this week, but just rounding off TV show stuff, Star Trek Picard back for its 3rd episode. Have you been watching this?
I saw the first 2 episodes.
The first episode really dragged for me, and I think they sort of stepped it up with the 2nd episode and got a little bit more action. I don't think he's spoiling things particularly because Q's involved, but it ends up with them going back in time. That becomes fairly apparent very early on.
I think they ruined that in like first episode sizzle at the end, don't they?
Yeah, they pretty much do.
I'm pretty sure I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, that's sort of where we go with the 3rd episode. I actually have been really enjoying it. I've seen mixed reactions, but after that...
Yeah, I'm not feeling it so far.
Yeah, the first episode, I think, really dragged. The 2nd episode, I think they clawed it back a bit. And the 3rd episode, I think, is working okay for me. You know, it's going all right. I know there was a mixed reaction to the first season, and I think they lost their way a bit towards the end of that. I like the time travel stuff when it comes to Star Trek. I find that kind of fun. So I'm enjoying what they're doing with it so far. Discovery had its finale as well this week. What did you think of that? Have you got to that yet?
Yeah, I think this season of Discovery is an improvement. Mm-hmm. I think they've at least begun to take the notes that you need to look at the crew as a whole. So at least we get like 3 stories. We follow the Doctor, we follow the Captain. They're the main 2. too. And obviously we get Tilly's story, even though she disappears for half the season.
Yes.
But yeah, so I guess maybe they took the memo. So we'll have to see if they keep it up next season.
Yeah, they seem to be setting it up for them doing a bit more exploring.
Yeah, they've gone past the,
Yeah, last season we were dealing with the time jump and them trying to get the Federation back together. This season has been a bit more of that, plus they've had this big threat to deal with, so that is now done. But they seem to be hinting towards them actually going back to the wider kind of exploring stuff. That seemed to be where they're settled at the end of it. Now the sort of Federation's there and it's set up and it seems to be stable and running again. They've managed to get ships working again. So it's interesting that that's the direction they seem to have gone when they're also launching Strange New Worlds, which is purely a show based around that, but further back in the timeline. So I do wonder whether there's maybe going to be some connection between the two.
Yeah, but is it though? Because Strange New World is surely going to just remix a lot of the things that we saw in the first Star Trek. I think it's going to hit a lot of things. It's just going to be an Easter egg show, basically.
Well, possibly. There is that.
So I think that's what you'll see there. Whereas I think with Discovery, I thought they painted themselves into for a while with that spore drive. But if they go exploring past the rim, it means they can't use it anymore because there's no mycelial network out there.
Yeah.
So, as I say, I think they've done good things. I think they've made changes, and that's all you can ask for in a show because it was just too much centered on Michael. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was a fun story. I wasn't the best fan of the big Mirrorverse issue, but we'll just have to hold that for now.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you that I was like, oh god, it's going to be another Mirrorverse thing, but it's more of a sort of multiverse thing than a mirror universe. It wasn't sort of evil counterparts as such, but they are doing a lot of that right now. So I would like a season where it is about them actually discovering things in Discovery. Would be quite nice if they could actually do that. So yeah, we'll see where they go for season 5, but they did a decent job, I thought, with rounding that off. A couple of movies I've watched which I've been meaning to get to for ages. The big one being Spider-Man No Way Home, which I finally got round to watching and is as wonderful as everybody said it was going to be. I don't know how spoilery we kind of get here, but I mean, obviously, I think everybody knows at this point that Tom Holland as Peter Parker is not the only Spider-Man in this film. And I thought it was sort of interesting where they left things with that as well, because you've brought everybody together. It got this opportunity for the 3 movie Spider-Men to meet, and I thought that was great, the way that they brought that together, but the entire world's losing the memory of who Peter Parker is sets it up for an interesting direction of what they can do moving forward, because it does sort of wipe the slate clean for that character, and he doesn't have to be attached to the Avengers anymore. And I'm really interested to see where they go with it, because they are doing more films, as they've said. I don't think we need a sort of big multiverse thing again, but much as I enjoyed seeing the other Spider-Men, they've done that once. So we don't know what's going to happen with the Multiverse of Madness, of course. That movie may change the entire landscape of the MCU again, but in terms of where they left things with this, I think that sets it up with Peter potentially going off to be the photographer for the Bugle, which is, I think, probably the direction they may be going in, and having to sort of re-meet MJ and all that sort of stuff. So I really enjoyed it, though. I mean, it is a fun movie. It's well directed. The story sits together well. There's lots of great gags in there. It was wonderful seeing all those villains in kind of one place. It's a sort of nice rounding off to that little sort of trilogy of things and gives them a clean slate to move forward with as well. But I'm really interested to see what they do with it, and whether you do get some sort of introduction of other versions of maybe Norman Osborn possibly moving forward, or whether we're going to see any more of that, or I don't know. It's sort of interesting. You've seen this.
I have indeed. I loved it. I did love the running time. I did some serious internal damage having to sit down about, but it was great. It was a packed cinema. It was reasonably quiet, which is always nice for a cinema. Got lots of claps when we had the first cameo, and then obviously much more claps when the main cameo started popping up. So it was a lot of fun. I like how they left it. It makes for a very different piece than we've seen, because this one has always been very it's always been fairly lighthearted. it's such a huge change to what he is.
Yeah.
Because obviously he's very much centered by the people who are around him.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing with this, because where they move forward with it, it's taken all that support away from him, which is a very different version of Peter that you're left with. Although arguably, possibly a version that is closer to the comic book version or some of the comic book versions in places.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And it was sort of interesting having the conversation between the three of them, where, of course, the other two had lost Uncle Ben, and Peter hadn't been through that. So that was a sort of interesting thing. And where it leaves this version of Peter at the end of the film, I'm really intrigued to see where they move forward with it, because it does set this version of Tom Holland's Peter Parker on a slightly different path to where he'd been before. It was just been this kind of kid that had lost Tony Stark, maybe, which is probably the closest thing he'd had to a father figure at that point. But that still hadn't affected him as much as maybe as it affected the other Spider-Man when they had lost somebody close to them. So it's just sort of interesting where they've left this. So I'm really intrigued to see what they announce next for this version of Peter. The other thing I watched was also a Disney-related film. It was Turning Red, which is a Pixar movie based around a 13-year-old Chinese-Canadian girl who lives in Toronto. She is very much sort of a product of her rather overbearing mother who likes having out and having fun with her friends. She's very much her own person, obsessed with this boy band called Four Town, and just your average 13-year-old girl. But they run this temple which is dedicated to these red panda gods, and she has to rush home and try and help out her mother, but she enjoys it. You know, she enjoys spending time with her mum and being the good, dutiful daughter. And then one night she blows her stack over something that goes wrong, and it turns out that when she has extreme emotional reactions to something, she suddenly starts to turn into a giant red panda herself. And it turns out that there's this curse/gift that is sort of given to the family, and it's triggered by a major sort of emotional reaction. So, of course, that leads to sort of any crush on boys can potentially set it off, or she just gets angry at something. So it's the sort of analogy for being a teenager and losing control of your emotions and becoming this sort of big hairy monster that is a pain to be around and that sort of stuff. So I thought it was beautifully done. It does what Pixar movies do so well in taking an idea and using an interesting, fun analogy for it to be able to express it on screen. And things like Inside Out were a wonderful example of this. I don't think it's up there with Inside Out. I think that's a wonderful, wonderful film, but it's still a really solid, well put together, well directed, interesting way of introducing those concepts to maybe a younger audience and getting them to sort of understand those transitions and stuff. But yeah, I thought it was really good. Have you seen this?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
It's one definitely worth taking a look at. It's got Sandra Oh does the voice of the overbearing mother. There are a few names in the cast that you might recognise, but yeah, it's up on Disney Plus right now, and I'm trying to work through some of the other Disney movies that I haven't got around to watching it, like Encanto is the other one that I haven't actually seen yet, but and everybody tells me that's great. So that's all the stuff we've been doing this week. Let's move on to some TV and film news. We kick off the TV and film news with the renewals, cancellations and pickups. Only a couple of renewals and cancellations. One of them not really affecting the UK particularly, but I thought we should mention it because it is quite a big thing. Maury, which is the talk show, which I'm sure you will have seen memes and stuff made from the Maury talk show. Yeah, and I mean, I've watched it as well. I'm sure it aired over here for a bit. It was a syndicated talk show. It was renowned for people taking paternity tests on it. That was probably one of the big things they did. It's been on air for 3 decades, and he says it's been cancelled, although he has said he's retiring. So, you know, after 30 years on air, fair enough. I'm sure he feels like he's done enough there. So that is ending after 30 years on air. The other one was New Amsterdam, which, yes, probably is cancelled, but coming to an end with, I think it's a shortened 13 episode, I think, final 5th season. We've still got season 4 to go out over here, so we'll have 2 more seasons to go over here, but that's coming to an end. end, which I'm very sad about because that's a really solid, decent medical drama that, and I think does really, really well and is interesting. The characters are fun. I've interviewed the cast for that and they're just wonderfully fun to be around. So I am a bit sad to see that ending, but at least it's going out with a final season and not just getting cancelled and shelved. Renewals, Abbott Elementary, which hasn't got a broadcaster over here yet, although it is an ABC show, so I imagine it'll turn up on Disney Plus at some point, but that's been renewed for a second season, so that will be returning. That's been getting quite decent reviews, I seem to remember, for that. There are a huge amount of pickups and other pieces this week as well. The big one being on Disney Plus, NCIS, the main show, which has been missing since Disney took Fox off air, is returning for its 19th season on Wednesday, the 6th of April. It was like October last year where they said, hey, we've got the next season of NCIS, and then said nothing until last week. So it was a random one for them to buy because it's a CBS show, isn't it? So that's a buy-in for them. It's not like an ABC show. So for some reason they decided to buy it. But NCIS season 19, Wednesday the 6th of April on Disney Plus. I think the first 3 episodes are going out at once and then it's airing weekly, which is mildly annoying because the entire thing will have gone out in the US by the time they start to do that. But that's how they've said they're going to do it, so we're stuck with it. But
are they making other seasons available?
Yes, all previous 18 seasons will also be on.
That's quite cute. I might have to watch a few old ones.
Yeah, so if you want to go back and start from the beginning, there are 18 seasons of NCIS you could go through, but 19th season will be landing on the 6th of April. I think that's the same day they're dropping all the other 18 seasons on there as well. Raised by Wolves has got an air date as well. That's also the 6th of April. That's going to be on Sky Atlantic, and now that's for the second season of that sci-fi drama. Quite enjoyed the first season of that, but it seems such a long time ago at this point. But yes, that is back for its second season, so I'm looking forward to that. Couple of new shows popping up on Netflix. One of them is called Hard Sell. This is a documentary-style comedy set in a fictional female prison, and it's got Catherine Tate in it, who I think also wrote it, and she plays multiple characters. So it's sort of a Catherine Tate sketch show, but set in a prison, with her playing the governess, Big Viv, who is a psychopathic lifer, various other characters. There's like 5 or 6 characters. She plays one of the guards and other people in the prison.
Are there other people?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not just her. There are other cast members as well. It's set over a 6 weeks period during which the inmates rehearse a musical directed by ex-EastEnders star Cheryl Ferguson, apparently. So the rehearsal draws together an oddball collection of women as they find their voices, growing confidence and strengthen their friendships. So it's sort of a mockumentary series about that, with Catherine Tate playing a bunch of the characters, essentially. So if you're a Catherine Tate fan, going to be one to watch, but that's called Hard Sell. It's on Tuesday the 12th of April on Netflix. That is landing if you want to check that one out. The other one is Heartstopper, which I think we mentioned a couple of times before. This is actually a comic book adaptation, but it's coming on Friday the 22nd of April on Netflix. When gentle Charlie and rugby-loving Nick meet in secondary school, they quickly discover that their unlikely friendship has blossomed into an unexpected romance. Charlie, Nick, and their circle of friends must navigate the everly relatable journey of self-discovery and acceptance, supporting each other as they learn to find their most authentic selves. I'm sure if you're a fan of things like Love, Victor and those sort of shows, this will be very much in that sort of vein. It does look really sweet. There is a trailer up on the website if you want to go and check that out. But yes, that's called Heartstopper, and that's on the 22nd of April on Netflix. More advanced air dates. Dollface returns for its second season on Disney Plus. That's on the 27th of April. That's landing. I loved the first series of this. It was wonderfully strange.
Oh, I haven't seen it. I do know that Shay Mitchell stars in it alongside, I forget who the main stars it. Kat
Dennings. Yes.
Kat Dennings.
It's the main start. Kat Dennings, Brenda Swan, Shay Mitchell, Esther Povitsky are the main, and then there's various other people. Lily Singh pops up in the second season. Goran Visnich was in the first season. I don't know whether he was around in the second season, but yes, there's a few kind of interesting names pop up in that, but it's wonderfully strange. It's fun, but it also has some weird, odd elements in it. Like, it's basically about a girl that her relationship breaks up and she has to sort of reconnect with her female friends who she kind of abandoned while she was in this relationship. But there is also this kind of imaginary world that she has where there is a talking cat lady in there who has an actual cat head for a face, and it gets, so there's some weird kind of imaginary stuff that goes on in there as well. There's a sort of Ally McBeal vibe to it, if you're old enough to remember that show, with the dancing baby. Yeah. It's got that sort of, most of the show is in reality, but there are odd, weird little bits in it like that. That's wonderful, though. But that's Dollface. That's back for a second season. That's on the 27th of April. The Flight Attendant returns for its second season. We haven't got an exact date for this, but it's dropping in May on Sky Max in the UK, and it'll be on now as well. The first season of this was brilliant and just wonderfully, wonderfully fun. The second season is pretty much a straight continuation of where we left things at the end of the first one, because obviously the first one was about her, Kaylee Clark, who wakes up in bed next to a dead guy, and she's obviously the flight attendant in this, and all the fallout from that and what happens. That's sort of resolved, but it continues where we left things at the end of the season without spoiling anything for anybody. Continues on for that. So really looking forward to that, because the first season was absolutely brilliant. The Time Traveller's Wife, they've also announced, is coming to Sky Atlantic in May. This is a new series adaptation, stars Rose Leslie and Theo James in the two leading roles as the titular wife and time traveller, and it's Stephen Moffat that has written it, who has some experience with time travellers, having done Doctor Who, but very much seems like it's written with his sort of sense of humour to it from the trailer that they've put up. They released a trailer for it, so that's up on the website. It looks really good. I like the lead actors in it. I love Stephen Moffat when he's writing these sort of romantic comedy things and has a time travel element to it. I mean, seems absolutely perfect for Stephen Moffat. They did a film, didn't they, of this? Although I believe they did, yeah. I don't believe, I've never actually seen it, but this looks like it's going to be a really nice mix of the sort of lighter comedy, romantic comedy stuff, as well as being, a little bit more serious in places. I think it's going to be a really nice balance, that, but the trailer looks really good. So that's coming in May to Sky Atlantic, but doesn't have an exact date. Borgen, which is the Scandinavian series, that has got a continuation series. It's called Borgen Power and Glory. That's starting on the 2nd of June worldwide on Netflix. I think it's launching slightly earlier if you're in a Scandinavian country. Presumably it gives them a little bit more time to do the dubbing work, I guess. Otherwise I don't know why they're not launching it together, but I guess that's the reason. But Borgen Power and Glory, that's called. It's a direct continuation from, I think it was 3 or 4 seasons they did of the original show. It is a direct continuation of that. A lot of the same cast are in there, including the main lead roles. Thursday, 2nd of June, that is launching on Netflix worldwide. And then we've got a date for Miss Marvel that has landed as well. That's going to be the next Marvel series after Moon Knight, which launches on the 30th of March. Miss Marvel is landing on Wednesday, the 8th of June. That's when that'll land. So not a huge gap between the two, because sort of a month in between, maybe between one launching and the other. Yeah. So they've got that. And then we've got another Netflix series. Now, I'm pretty sure this is probably going to be terrible. My gut feeling about this, because they've not released any images or trailer for it or anything yet, but Resident Evil, it's a live action series. It's starting on the 14th of July.
Yeah, but Netflix, we all know that Netflix doesn't believe in advertising for whatever reason.
Yes, I guess that is true. And I guess they can probably think they can sell it on the name possibly. But usually when they make the initial announcement, you get at least like, here's a first look image or something, and we'll not even have that. So the year is 2036, 14 years after a deadly virus caused a global apocalypse. Jade Wesker fights for survival in a world overrun by the bloodthirsty, infected and insane creatures. In this absolute carnage, Jade is haunted by her past in New Raccoon City, by her father's chilling connection to the Umbrella Corporation, but mostly what happened to her sister Billy. It's an 8-episode series, stars Lance Reddick Nick, who was in Bosch, American Horror Story, and a whole bunch of other things, as Albert
Loads of things.
Wesker. He's playing Albert Wesker, the father. Are there any other names you know in there? I don't know any of them.
Well, Ella Balinska, she's in Charlie's Angels.
There you go.
Adeline Rudolph, I remember her because she's in Chilling Events in Sabrina, and she's pop up for a couple episodes in Riverdale.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that I immediately recognize.
Turlo Curvy is in there, who was in Killing Eve and Poldark. Senna Adungong, who was in No Good Nick. I think she played Nick in No Good Nick, which was the Netflix series. Tamara Smart from The Worst Witch. So, yeah, I mean, there's a few people there that people may recognize. I don't hold a huge amount of hope out for that series, in all honesty, but
Would it be better than the movie?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the movies were kind of fun, if silly, but...
Well, no, I meant the new movie that Sony popped out with, what's his name from The Flash?
I don't know.
And Kaya Scodelario as well.
Who knows? It doesn't seem to have any connection to any of the other Resident Evil stuff that's been released. So... we'll see. But that's the live action series. They have got an animated series, which I think has already gone out, but there's a live action series which comes on the 14th of July for that. A couple of other little bits and pieces. There is apparently a True Detective season 4 in the works at HBO. Barry Jenkins, who was the guy that did the Underground Railroad, is serving as exec producer on the 4th season. Nick Palazzo, who was the guy that co-wrote every episode of the original 3 seasons, is not currently attached at all for season 4.
Well, forget about it.
Yeah, so if you're a fan of the first 3 seasons, which I know were kind of a bit uneven, first season was brilliant, second season was like, bleh. The 4th season is apparently True Detective Night Country. That's the title it's going under at the moment. I don't know. I mean, Barry Jenkins is great. He's an Oscar winner as well. So not a bad name to have attached to it, but I don't know. And they are anthology things, so you can jump into them from season to season, I guess. But
sure. It's an interesting premise.
Yes. I watched the first one and I really enjoyed the first season. The second one got absolutely panned. The third one got kind of middling reviews, I seem to remember. So
I watched the first, didn't make it all the way through the second, and definitely didn't watch the third. So
yeah, I think the second sort of put a lot of people off. So I don't know, but they are making a 4th season of that with a different guy in charge. So we'll see. And the other big news that dropped this week was Amazon's acquisition of MGM, which we've been talking about for a while, has actually gone through. That is now a done deal. They paid squillion dollars for it or whatever it was. It was like some stupid billions for it they paid. The good news so far, anyway, is they did what they call a town hall. So they did a meeting between Amazon and MGM people. They did say that there are no redundancies at the moment. There's some restructuring in terms of what company is going to report to what other company. There's obviously that going on as they sort of integrate things. But they've said they're trying to avoid redundancies, and they've certainly not announced any mass redundancies at this point. So that's good news. MGM, of course, are the people that control things like Rocky, Legally Blonde, the Pink Panther films, TV shows like Handmaid's Tale, Fargo, Vikings, Stargate as well, of course, which has a lot of people quite hopeful that maybe they will actually do something to reboot the Stargate franchise, possibly.
Maybe.
Which would be nice, you know.
It would be great if they do it right, of course. Yeah,
I mean, the Stargate Universe was it Stargate Universe the last?
There was a one that came after that.
Yeah, but we don't talk about that. No. It was very funny. They were talking about when I saw some of the Stargate guys were up on stage at Wales Comic Con, and it's very funny when you get to that point in the interview, they were like talking about the shows, and I think somebody shouted it out or somebody mentioned it on stage, and they were like, shh, we don't talk about that. But Stargate Universe, I thought, was a really great show, and it was such a shame that they bottled it and decided they weren't going to carry it on. I would like to see a TV thing come back for Stargate. Not necessarily the same cast. You could have them come in and guest and do bits and pieces, but I'd be happy if they did, you know.
I would like, I want a new story.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy with a new team. I don't necessarily want a complete reboot. I'm happy if it's connected to the SG-1 kind of universe, TV universe. But you've years on now. You could bring back 1 or 2 people if you wanted. But, you know, I'd be okay with a new main team and, you know, a new show and a new story and something kind of different and let them move on with it. But, yeah, I mean, I'd love to see some of the older faces back, obviously. But I just want them to do something with that universe because it was such a fun fun world to be in. I think they did such a wonderful job with it. So, don't know. They've not announced anything yet, but we'll see whether anything comes out of that. That's, I think, what most people are hoping for in our sort of genre world, is something new for Stargate. Bond is, of course, the other big thing with MGM, but the thing with Bond is MGM share the rights with Eon Productions, which is the company that is owned by the Broccoli family, and the Broccoli family rule Bond with an iron fist. So they basically have control over everything from the casting decisions to the distribution. So although Amazon have bought this, you're not going to suddenly see a James Bond TV series because the Broccoli family will veto it. It's one of those things that, yes, technically Bond is now owned by Amazon, but not really. It's different paymasters in there, but essentially it's going to be carrying on with the Broccoli family in charge of it. So Amazon don't get any direct control. They just get some of the money out of it. That's basically it. Moving on to some other news stories. One of the things that dropped today was the fact that they've just cast the young Winchesters for the Winchesters pilot, which is this prequel thing that they're doing as a spin-off for Supernatural. The idea behind this is it follows John and Mary, who are Sam and Dean's parents, and it's the epic untold love story of how John and Mary met and how they put it all on the line, not only to save their love, but to save the entire world. The two people that they've cast is Meg Donnelly, who's going to be playing Mary Campbell, who at 19 years old has been fighting the forces of darkness since she was a child. After losing someone close to her, the hardened hunter considered quitting the family business until her father's disappearance and the arrival of newcomer John Winchester forces her to lead a new team. So that's Mary, and then Drake Roger is playing John Winchester, who's a very good-looking chap. He recently returned from Vietnam and is the selfless and clear-headed John finds a new mission back home where traces of his father's past lead him to a secret organisation and a whole new war as a hunter. I don't know how much that's just rewritten the history of Supernatural.
Well, it got rewritten like during the show because they did change it to make his father a man of letters,
yes,
if you remember. But before then, he wasn't anything at all, and he didn't find out about her hunting until quite late on. But hey, never mind.
Yes, so I think they have done some rewriting of the history there, but, you know, whatever. Yeah, whatever, that's fine. Out of the two leads, Meg Donnelly is probably best known for American Housewife. That was the show that she's in. She's also apparently going to be next seen in the ridiculously titled High School Musical, the musical, the series.
Excellently titled.
High School Musical, the musical, the series. Isn't it got another subtitle on it now? Isn't it like the camp or something?
I don't know. That's an excellent title.
Yes. So that she's also involved in the Disney Channel original movies Zombies as well, which she stars and serves as a producer in those. So she's been in that. Drake Rogers, he's last seen in Paramount's The In-Between, and there's a film called Quiet in My Town. I don't know him at all, but take one look at him, and he's basically...
I've got the deadline up, and I can see, very good-looking guy.
Very much picked for his looks, I think, that guy. I mean, I'm sure he can act as well, but very much picked because he looks a little bit like a cross between Jensen Ackles and Jeffrey D. Morgan. So, yes, I mean, visually, definitely.
Well, that's good casting.
Yeah, visually done casting, and I'm assuming the guy can act, so, you know, fair enough. We don't know whether this is going to go anywhere. It is only a pilot for the CW right now. We'll have to wait and see whether they actually decide to pick it up, because they've always, I mean, they've done pilots for Supernatural before. This is what, the fourth one they've tried? Third one?
But this is the first time it's actually been a pilot.
Yes, yeah.
The other ones have been backdoors.
Yeah, the last two were backdoor pilots. And the one thing that this does have going for it is Jensen Ackles and his wife that are behind it, along with Robbie Thompson, who was also part of the Supernatural crew. So Jensen is actually coming back to do the narration for this. He's narrating how his parents met.
I think he's got the best talent of all of them.
Yeah, I mean, whilst it was on air, they always said, well, it doesn't really work without the boys. But I think maybe at this point, there's been a little bit of breathing room between the two. Maybe this will work, but we'll see. We'll let you know if that gets picked up. We should know by May whether that's going to go anywhere, I would think. Moving on to other news, this was a weird one. There is apparently a YouTube biopic in the works at Netflix from J.J. Abrams. And it's...
I think, okay, the J.J. Abrams part is weird, but the YouTube biopic at Netflix, that's not weird at all.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a biopic on U2 isn't that odd. I mean, Bono annoys me, but the band are quite good. The music's fine. I just wish Bono would shut up sometimes. But it's been penned by the same guy that wrote Bohemian Rhapsody. And I mean, there were issues with Bohemian Rhapsody as well. But he's also Oscar nominated for screenplays for things like The Two Popes, Darkest Hour, and The Theory of Everything. So, I mean, he's got a decent person behind it. JJ doing it is maybe a little bit odd. I mean, maybe he's just a big U2 fan, possibly. It's inspired by...
Yeah, but is it JJ or is it just Bad Robot? And it makes a metal title to say J.J. Abrams.
Yeah, well, that is true as well, of course. It depends whether he's actually involved directing it or whatever, but yeah, it's Bad Robot apparently that are involved in doing it. I mean, we'll see whether that comes to anything, but apparently that came from Deadline, that article, and apparently Netflix and Bad Robot have declined to comment, so who knows. On to some casting news, though. Mandalorian have added Christopher Lloyd to season 3. We don't know what he's playing, but in my book, you add Christopher Lloyd to anything, it makes it better because Christopher Lloyd is absolutely wonderful. So I'm fine with this. Whether it's something that is attached to Grogu or whether he's going to be under a whole bunch of makeup. I mean, they had Nick Nolte, of course, in there, who provided the voice for the Ugnaught. We've had Carl Weathers, Giancarlo Esposito, of course, played Moff Gideon. So they've had some decent, respectable actors in roles on Mandalorian. I'm very interested to see what Christopher Lloyd ends up playing in this, and whether it ends up being a sort of on-screen role or whether he's just doing a voice or what. But he's apparently popping up in Mandalorian season 3. I have a cousin who works in finance for film and TV production, and she said she met Christopher Lloyd once and said, if you could bottle Christopher Lloyd and sell it, you make a fortune because he is the most delightful human you'll ever meet. Which is lovely to hear about people, because sometimes you hear these stories about people and it's like they come across wonderful on screen and they're awful, but apparently Christopher Lloyd is an absolute delight. So yes, I think he's brilliant. I'm very happy that he's joining Mandalorian. And the last news story we've got for this week is about Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and it was an interesting bit of casting that popped up. Paul Wesley, who people will know from Vampire Diaries, I'm sure, has been cast as Captain Kirk in season 2 of Strange New Worlds, which is interesting. Strange New Worlds, obviously, we know about the TV show, supposed to be following the Enterprise under the captaincy of Christopher Pike, and that is the basic premise of it. It's sort of Pike years on the Enterprise, and it's the people that we've seen before, Ethan Peck as Spock and Rebecca Rumjin as number 1, and, all that stuff. So great, we're going to have this sort of Strange New World series. And they've now announced that Kirk is going to show up in the second season. And the reaction online has been intriguing as well, because whilst nobody seems... I don't think people seem to have a huge problem, as far as I can see. They don't have that much of a problem with the casting of Paul Wesley as Kirk. I mean, I can see that. I think it works. And
I've seen a lot of blowback for the casting.
Have you? Yeah, I can see that.
I think it's excellent casting. Yeah. I think people just need to chill because, Vampire Diaries may not be for everyone's taste, but he held down a show where, let's be honest, not every lead manages to do it.
Yes.
And some stop halfway through, so.
Yeah.
I've only ever heard sort of good things about him. He always seems to be, like, in the interviews and stuff, seems to be pretty good. And the rest of the cast say reasonably nice things about him. Yeah. And I've seen the pictures of the new updated uniform, and I'm like, yeah, he does look like this can work.
Yeah.
Obviously, the choice, that's a different thing entirely.
Yeah.
It's odd, but then you think of it, and I think to myself, well, as we're seeing in Picard right now, they do like to shake things up.
Yeah, this is the sort of interesting thing. Obviously, there's two at the moment. There are two main timelines. There is the main established timeline, which, everything stems through the original series. And there is the Kelvin timeline, which is what they play around with the movies, with Chris Pine's version of Kirk in there. And that's a whole different thing. In the established main timeline, at the moment, Kirk only meets Pike once, and that's literally when he's handed over the keys to the Enterprise. That's the first time he meets him, and then he meets him slightly later on. There is an episode where, if you know what happens to Pike, the visions that he saw at the end of Discovery come true, and he ends up in this sort of wheelchair thing. And they do, I think, meet at that point as well. But the first time that the two of them actually meet is when he gets the keys to the Enterprise and takes over as captain of the Enterprise. So part of this is it has some people slightly worried that we're going to get one season of Pike and then they're going to get rid of him and they're going to stick Kirk in. But you see, I can't see that working either, because the problem is that if you do that, Kirk had like a 5-year mission, and I guess the TV show was somewhere near the start of that 5-year mission, so you'd be basically repeating the original series, so that doesn't work either. So I don't know.
They're just changing it. Kirk wasn't a captain before. That was his first captain.
That's the other thing. In the publicity shots that they've released,
he's wearing captains.
He's wearing the captain's uniform. It's clearly a captain's uniform because you can tell by the stripes on his arm. So that's the other interesting thing, is he's in a captain's chair as a captain, and he isn't in the current timeline. He doesn't become captain until he takes over the Enterprise either. He has served on other ships before then, so there are things like the Farragut, which he served on, which had this sort of big disaster. We don't know in what capacity he's showing up either, so we don't know whether this is some sort of timey-wimey stuff. It could be a flash forward, it could be some sort of out-universe thing. It could be that the events of Picard have maybe altered when that season plays out. It maybe have nudged some things around in the history, possibly. Maybe that's where that sort of has an effect, because obviously that involves time travel, and maybe it doesn't completely recess everything back properly. Maybe that's where they're going with it. But yeah, I don't know. I know that was the thing, more so than the actual physical casting of him. That was the thing that seemed to set more people off, as far as I could tell. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure there was backlash against him, because there were people that are going to be like, William Shatner's the only Kirk. But I mean, I'm fine with them casting him. I think he's a great fit. But how they're going to actually introduce him as a captain in that part of the timeline, that I'm kind of interested in, because at the moment, I mean, there are literally printed Bibles that you can go out and buy of the history timeline of Star Trek. And if they're about to make all that wrong, that's going to upset quite a lot of people as well. So,
welcome to what Star Wars fans went through when Disney decided to reboot everything.
Quite. Yes, that is very true. We'll have to wait and see for that. Strange New Worlds, of course, I think, as we mentioned last week or the week before, due to start streaming on the 5th of May. It's on Paramount Plus in the US. We don't have Paramount Plus and might not have Paramount Plus over here by then. So, as to where it's going to launch over here, we don't know. Whether they delay it until they do launch Paramount Plus, that's a possibility. Whether they put it out on Pluto TV thing like they did with Discovery, whether it ends up somewhere else, don't know at the moment. My guess is they may hold it until they launch Paramount Plus, which would suck, but that could be what they end up doing. But as for the Kirk thing, we'll have to wait and see. So that's all the news we've got for this week. Just a few highlights for next week on TV. Highlights for next week. We have Parallels, which is a French sci-fi series coming onto Disney Plus. It's a Disney original. It's about 4 friends whose lives are turned upside down when a mysterious event scatters the group into different timelines. There's a trailer actually up for this. You can watch it, I presumably with subtitles or dubbed, but the trailer's dubbed. Seem to be doing a reasonable job with it, and it does look quite interesting if you're into sort of sci-fi things. That's 23rd of March on Disney Plus.
It reminds me of the Nowhere Boys.
Right, yeah.
Which was an Australian show about these 4 friends who go out on a school trip and through strange shenanigans manage to write themselves out of history.
Oh, right.
And so then obviously they're now trying to sort of figure things out.
That's kind of interesting. Yeah, this is called Parallels, and that's 23rd of March on Disney Plus if you want to check that out. Not going out, the Lee Mack series, that returns for the 12th season. That's on BBC One. That's on 25th of March at 9:30 on BBC One. Bridgerton is back for its 2nd second season. That's also on the 25th of March. That is, of course, on Netflix. And the Oscars are this week. It's actually going out on Sky Showcase, so you can watch it if you've got Sky. That's the 94th Academy Awards. Starts at midnight on the 27th of March and then runs through for the next 4 hours or something. That's the Oscars. And The Flash finally lands in the UK, opening with the Armageddon Not a Crossover event, and that's coming to Sky Max on the 29th of March at 8 p.m. on Sky Max. And Legends is later in the week, but we'll talk about that next week. But 29th of March for The Flash Season 8. They do a pretty good job with that crossover. I caught it while I was in America, so worth watching, definitely. That's all the highlights for next week. If people want to find more of your stuff, where can they find you, Darryl?
So you can head over to HollywoodNorthNews.net and they can see what's up right now, which is my interview with Agam Darshi, as I mentioned before, and some of the other news about Hallmark shows and Hallmark stars signing new deals and such. So just head over there or head over to our YouTube, Twitter, or Instagram.
Yep, so go and check out all Darryl's stuff over there. For other people involved in the show, you can, of course, find Bex on twitch.tv/Trista Bytes. That's BYTES. Lots of streams up on there daily and various evenings. I think she's still playing Tomb Failure over there, where you can watch her fall off things. Also, generally kind of injure herself in real life when she does her just chatting streams, because she usually manages to smack herself in the head with something. You can go and find her over on there. They're usually quite fun to go and watch, but that's twitch.tv/Trista Bytes. And Matt, you can go and find over at entertainmenttalk.org for lots more podcasts over there. And of course, we are doing the Walking Dead UK podcast, which goes out on Wednesdays over there. For us, you can go to the website at geektown.co.uk throughout the week and see all the latest air date information. If you want to get in touch with your questions or comments, email us on podcast@geektown.co.uk. Leave a message on the website post. Find us at Geektown on Twitter, on Facebook at facebook.com/Geektown, on YouTube at youtube.com/Geektown, and on Instagram at Geektown UK. That is everything. We shall see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.